Can you be an atheist and practice tantric yoga? The answer is yes, of course. You can be an atheist and practice tantric yoga. Yoga is not a religion. It can be considered a religion, but in principle, it is not a religion. Yoga is a method for exploring and understanding consciousness. That's what it is. And you can be an atheist, you can be a theist, monotheist, polytheist, you can be anything you want to be and still practice yoga. And in fact, there is a place for all of these viewpoints, all of these modes of thinking within yoga. Some of my students I have instructed in the practice of atheism as a method for exploring consciousness. Atheism is a practical means of accessing a deeper connection to the material world and to the self, because ultimately atheism is simply a rejection of unification at any level with the metaphysical principle of God. So what is the metaphysical principle of God? Well, anything that we worship can be considered a god. This tree, for example, can be considered a god. If I want to practice bhakti and worship the tree, it becomes a deity for me. Now, you can have a material formation of divinity that you worship, and many atheists will actually recognize this and they'll say, well, that's basically a god, but it's in a materialistic form. Or you can have a metaphysical expression of God. So I could say that this tree is more than just a physical thing that I'm worshiping. It is an emanation of a principle, a metaphysical principle that is beyond the material world. I could, for example, worship this tree as an emanation of Yggdrasil, the Norse world tree, if I wanted to. And that would, just by bringing my awareness to the metaphysical principle, begin to shift me away from the raw material expression of consciousness. The material root of consciousness in our body is the Muladhara. The Muladhara chakra represents prime materiality. It is the closest we can get to the vulgar condition of consciousness, or the gross condition of consciousness, which is the physical world. In the present Yuga, the Kali Yuga, the present age that we have incarnated into, the material world is our foundational experience of consciousness. It is the thing that is easiest for us to grasp with immediacy. And the further you get away from material consciousness, the further you get away from the Muladhara, the increasing subtlety of consciousness begins to obscure the concepts that you're interacting with. That is why it is so difficult to see God in the present age, the metaphysical expression of God. That is why many people require intense faith in order to access and interact with that God principle. Now, there are some people who are completely consumed by the spirit. They are consumed by that subtle expression of consciousness that is far away from the material. And in order to repair some of the imbalance that can develop in the intense embrace of the spirit, it is important to re-engage with prime materiality. And you can do this by embracing, at least for a time, atheism. This is shutting the door on the spirit. This is shutting the door on that which is beyond so that you can bring your focus back to essential material constructs like skin and bone, like the physical manifestation of this tree behind me, the earth that I'm resting upon. If I say to myself, I reject God, there is no God, there is no divine principle, there is nothing beyond the physical world. If I continue to embrace this idea, naturally, this will bring me closer to the Muladhara. What's interesting about connecting to the Muladhara through practical atheism is that we can see the embrace of atheism in Muladhara-based social movements throughout history. The best example of this is communism. Communism is fundamentally materialistic, and it is a social body that is rooted in the Muladhara. The primary concern is with the material, with home, with basic resources, with food, with money. Money in terms of the material expression of money, not so much money as an idea, but moving away from that and coming back to the land, coming back to the shared space of the material tribe that is rooted in direct physical experience, as opposed to conceptualization that alienates people from their labor. So atheism is an important aspect of the transformation of consciousness that occurs within the social body under the regime of communism. There are many ways in which atheism can be utilized as a grounding force, not just in the Muladhara, but also in the Vishuddhi. Remember that the Vishuddhi is the grounding point of consciousness for contemplation, and the Muladhara is the grounding point of consciousness for the active expression or the material expression of consciousness. So atheism is actually a very potent tool that we can utilize in order to ground ourselves from time to time and ensure that we do not fall into a state of disconnection from the material world and delusion in the spirit.